Hello, everyone, and welcome to your Chipmunk Read-Along book. Every time you hear Alvin sound his harmonica, it means it's time to turn the page in your storybook. Now, if you're ready, we'll start The Chipmunks Cruise. And remember to turn the page every time you hear Alvin's harmonica. David Seville and the Chipmunks, Alvin, Simon, and Theodore, made their way along the deck of the SS Lurline cruise liner. Coming towards them was the captain. He shook Dave's hand and said,
"Welcome aboard, Mr. Seville. We're looking forward to seeing your boys perform tonight."
Alvin grinned and replied,
"And I'm looking forward to seeing the ship."
"Alvin, you can explore the ship after you put your things away in the cabin,"
said Dave. The ship pulled out of the harbor, and Dave led the way to their cabin. Alvin put away his clothes very quickly. He left them in a suitcase and shoved the suitcase into a dresser drawer. Then he ran out ahead of the others to go exploring. As Alvin raced down the deck, he spotted something very strange. A woman was stuck in a porthole, and she was kicking her legs frantically. Alvin ran up to her and said politely,
"Let me help you, ma'am."
And he began to tug on her ankles. Suddenly, there was a loud sound of material tearing, and the next moment, the woman popped free. Once she was back on her feet, the woman began to cry.
"Oh! Gee, I'm sorry your dress ripped,"
Alvin said to her. Then he looked at the torn sleeve of her dress and saw a tattoo on her arm. The woman was still sobbing as she covered up her tattoo.
"Oh, I'm not crying about the dress. It's my jewels. Someone stole them, and they're right there in cabin 209.
She pointed toward a porthole. Alvin stood on his toes and peered in. There, on the top of the dresser, was a box with sparkling jewelry.
"Oh, I'd get it myself, but I can't fit through the porthole,"
said the woman. Then, looking at Alvin, she said,
"But you can. Maybe you can get my jewels for me."
"Sure,"
said Alvin. The woman gave Alvin a boost into the cabin through the porthole. Alvin picked up the jewels and passed them out to the woman. Then he climbed back out onto the deck.
"Thank you so much,"
said the woman as she stuffed the jewelry into her purse and hurried away.
"Boy, I'll have to tell Dave about this,"
thought Alvin, and he ran off to find him. Alvin didn't look back, so he didn't see the woman take off her wig as she disappeared around the corner. She was really a man in disguise. Alvin finally found Dave and his brothers back in the cabin. He burst in shouting,
"Hey, everybody, listen to what happened to me."
But Dave interrupted.
"Hold on, Alvin. I have something to tell you first. The captain and the ship's detective just came by. They said there's been a theft aboard ship. Some jewelry was stolen from cabin 209.
Alvin gulped.
"Now, what's your news, Alvin?"
asked Dave.
Gee, I forgot, Dave.
Muttered Alvin nervously. Then he yawned.
Boy, I sure am tired. I think I'll take a nap.
Alvin climbed into the lower bunk and hid under the covers. While Dave went to fix up the stage for that night's show, Simon and Theodore decided to play detective. Armed with a magnifying glass and tweezers, just like the great detective, Sherlock Holmes, they went to cabin 209. Simon pulled 2 hairs from the porthole and examined them under the magnifying glass. A few minutes later, he cried out,
Aha! I know who our thief is! How do you know?
asked Theodore.
Elementary, my dear Watson.
Simon said, then explained.
These hairs are evidence, and just look at these fingerprints.
A short time later, back in their cabin, Simon shone his flashlight on Alvin and said,
Nap time's over, Alvin. We know you're the thief. Your fingerprints were all over cabin 209. Not to mention the 2 chipmunk hairs we found on the porthole.
added Theodore, holding up the hairs.
You're in big trouble.
Alvin hung his head as he admitted,
Okay. I did take the jewels, but I thought I was doing a good deed for this lady. And the only thing I remember about her was a tattoo on her arm. Tattoo? Perfect!
cried Simon with delight.
A tattoo will allow us to identify her. And I think I know a way to trap her right here in our own cabin.
Soon it was dinner time. The three chipmunks went ahead to the dining room while Dave was still setting up the stage for their show. When they'd almost finished eating, Simon whispered to his brothers.
Now don't forget your lines.
Theodore cleared his throat and said loudly,
Boy, am I nervous about all those jewels in our cabin number 127.
The busboy, clearing their table, looked at them. So did everyone else in the dining room. Next, it was Alvin's turn. He spoke loudly also.
I wonder if it's safe to perform tonight and lead our cabin, cabin 127, unguarded.
And Simon added,
Now let's get over to the stage and see how Dave is doing.
But Dave was no longer at the stage. He had gone back to the cabin a while earlier to pick up the chipmunks for dinner. Opening the cabin door, Dave called out,
Hey, guys, it's time for wow!
Poor Dave! The chipmunks had rigged a clever trap in their room to catch the jewel thief. In no time at all, Dave found himself caught in a net that was strung from the cabin ceiling. There was no way he could escape. All he could do was wait for someone to discover him. But soon, he drifted off to sleep. Even though the chipmunks didn't find Dave backstage, they began to carry out some of Simon's other plans,
Boy, you're full of good ideas, Simon.
said Theodore as he waved a paintbrush.
These cardboard figures we've made look just like us.
Simon smiled and explained,
And with this record player hooked up, no one will know it's not us singing on stage. The thief will think it's safe to go into our cabin, and we can get away to check our trap.
The chipmunks were not the only hard workers that evening. The busboy was busy too. He had heard the chipmunks talking at dinner. As soon as their concert began, he hurried to cabin 127 and began to search for jewels. He opened several drawers, but found nothing. Then he came to one drawer that would not open. Alvin's. The busboy tugged and tugged.
The chipmunks' jewels must be in here,
he muttered. The Chipmunks' concert was soon going full blast. The passengers were all enjoying the show, although the captain and the detective did notice that the Chipmunks looked a little stiff. Then the music vibration started to make the cardboard figure sway. The cardboard figure of Alvin tipped over and fell onto the record player. The Chipmunks song began to repeat one line over and over. The detective jumped up and cried,
Something's wrong here. Why, those aren't the chipmunks. Come on, let's get over to their cabin.
Meanwhile, the Chipmunks had returned to their cabin. They opened the door slowly and peeked inside. The busboy was still tugging at Alvin's drawer.
That's the thief.
Whispered Simon.
See the tattoo on his arm?
Just then, the drawer flew out of the dresser. Of course, there were no jewels in it. There was only Alvin's suitcase. The busboy fell backward from yanking so hard, and the Chipmunks rushed in and jumped on him.
We've got the thief!
Cried Theodore.
Hold him down!
Yelled Alvin. The noise in the room woke Dave, and he groaned. Simon looked up at the net. The room was still dark, so he couldn't see who was trapped in it.
If the guy down here is the thief, then who's that?
Suddenly, the lights went on, and the captain came running into the room with the detective close behind.
What's going on here?
Called the captain.
We rigged the trap to catch the thief.
Alvin began. The detective and the captain looked up at the net. The detective pointed his finger at Dave and exclaimed,
Caught you red-handed, eh, Seville?
Excuse me, but the real thief is here.
said Alvin, and the Chipmunk stood up to reveal the busboy. The detective and the captain pulled the busboy to his feet. As they did so, jewelry fell out of the man's uniform,
Why, those are the jewels stolen from cabin 209.
said the detective. The captain turned to Dave.
I'm very sorry, Mr. Seville, but mix-ups do happen. Nothing personal.
He and the detective helped Dave get out of the net. Then they led the busboy away. Dave turned to the Chipmunks and asked,
Would someone please tell me what's going on here?
and Alvin replied,
Sit down, Dave. It's a long story. We're the Chipmunks.